This video, we're going to create this simple application here, but we're going to learn a lot. So we're going to see how we can use Jetpack Compose to create simple UIs. Also, we're going to learn how to manage state and navigation from different screens. So we're going to learn a lot throughout this project. So if you're new to Jetpack Compose, then this project is really for you. So actually, it takes a tremendous amount of time to create these tutorials. So if you find helpful, please don't forget to provide a like, share, and subscribe. So let me know your thought in the comment section below. So this is just the login page and it's just really simple. So basically here we can just enter a username. So for example, here I'm just writing a username and also a password, which we can use here to log into another page. And for this case, we can just click here. Then we're going to be navigated to our home screen. And whenever we click here back, we're going to quit our application because we have already finished the flow from our login page. So as you can see again, we can just go to sign up page if we don't have. And for this case, we have this page here, which we can use to sign up. As you can see here, we're just filling up our forms and now we have an option to sign up, or we can just click here, sign in, to be navigated back to our sign in page. And basically we are back here to our sign in page. So guys, without any further ado, let's get started. So if you want to follow along with me, you can just get the GitHub project starter code from the link provided in the description box below. So the things which I have changed here is just the UI, and basically inside here I have added colors. So basically I'm using these 3 colors here inside my theme. So as you can see, I have changed several colors here and also inside our light color palette. So you can just get it. And also I have changed one thing, which is just the status bar here. So you can see we are changing this status bar to this background color. So these are just basically the things which I have changed. And another thing here is I have added one dependency here, which is just compose navigation. So you can just add them. And also inside here, our drawables, I have added these 3 icons here. So I have this GitHub icon and also we have this other. So you can just easily get the starter project and we are just good to go. Now let's set up our project here so that we can start to write our code. So the first case here, we are going to insert one package inside our UI here. Basically inside our UI package, let's create here a new package and we can call this, for example, the login. And also here we can add another package and call this sign up. And the last package here is the components, which we're going to store our components if we're going to have. Okay, so for this case, let's create first our sign up page. And for this case, we can just create here a new quoting class of file. And let's just call this signup screen, login screen. Okay, so let's create here a new composable. And basically we can just call this login screen. And this is basically enough for us. Okay, so let's look here at the thing which we are going to be building here. So you can see we are using this login screen here. And basically we can just split this to the right so that we can just see it. Okay, let's keep this aside. So you can see here we are going to build this simple screen, and basically what we have here is common things like a text field, which we are going to be having here. So we can create a component for this text field so that we can just reuse it throughout our package. So for this case, we can just go here inside our component and create our login text field. So let's create here a new quoting class of file, and basically we're going to select file here and we can just call this login text field. Okay, now here let's create a new composable and we can call this. So this component, we're going to reuse it throughout our application. Okay, so for this case, let's use our outline text field. As you have seen there, we're using an outlined text field. And there are several parameters which we have to pass inside here. So the first case here is I want to pass in a modifier. And we can give it a default modifier if we don't want to pass. And this is just a best practice. The second thing here is we have to create a value that is going to be of type of string and the on value change. Okay, so on value change here is going to take up a string lambda. So we are going to have a lambda function and we are going to see why. Okay, so these are the basics parameters which we require for now. We have to pass in here a modifier. Okay, so here we have to pass in the required parameters. So we have Okay, so here is our text field rendered and I think everything is looking perfectly. So let's go to our login screen here. Okay, so here inside our login screen, we have our data and we want to create this UI. So the first case which we want to do is to create the default variables. So for example, here we have our default padding, which I'm going to give it a 16 dp. And for this case, I can use them to change. Another case here is default spacing or items spacing. So we are going to give this 80 dp. Let's import this extension function. So for this case here, we can easily reuse this in order to make our UI consistent throughout. Okay, so you can see here our data is arranged in a column format. So for this case, let's create here our column. Okay, so one thing which I want to add here is this header text. And as you can see, we have this logging and basically we can create a separate composable inside here our component. Let's create a new coding class of file and select file. And for a case here, we are going to call this header text. Okay, now let's create here our composable and we can call this header text. And basically this takes in two parameters. So the first parameter here is the text, which is going to be of type a string. And the next case here is the modifier. Okay, now let's create here a normal text. That's just simple. And for case, we can pass in here our text with the text that is going to be passed. And another case I want to change here is the style. And basically I want to change the typography. So I can use here my material theme .typography and I want to use display medium because this is going to be large. And also I want to change the font weight. So for this case, we can change the font weight and make it bold. And then lastly, let's pass in here the modifier and we can hook up with our modifier. Okay, so now we have here our header text. Let's navigate back to our login screen. Okay, so let's call here our header text. And basically we can pass in here our text composable. So the first case is the text and this is just going to be the login. Okay, so the next case here I want to pass in here is the modifier. Okay, so I want to give it a padding. So I can pass in here modifier.padding and give it a padding vertically because you can see here horizontally we already added through our column. So vertically I want to give it a padding of default padding so that I can create here a spacing between these two text composables. As you can see here, we have a little bit of a spacing. So this one is going to do the trick, preview composable so that we can be previewing whenever we are writing our code. So let's create here a composable and call this preview logging screen. And let's add here add preview annotation. And inside here, we want to show our system UI and make this to be true. Okay, so here I want to call the theme, which is just going to be generated by Android Studio when you create your program. So this Jet login theme. And basically here, I want to call our login screen so that we can see it. Okay, now let's kickstart here our preview. So here we have our preview, but the styling we are going to worry about it at the later time, because right now we have something that is going on. So here we have our screenshot and here we have our preview. Okay, so for this case, let's continue here adding. So the next case here is to create this text field, and basically this is just really easy. For that case, we have already created our login text field. So let's call here our login text field. Okay, so let's pass in here our parameters. The first parameter is the value and the on value change. Also, we can pass in here the label text. And for a case, this is just going to be username. And also we can pass in here the leading icon. So for a case, we can use the icons composable. So this Android X compose, and we want to use .default and select a person. As here inside our design is looking, so everything is looking perfectly, and pass in here a modifier. Then we are going to change this. Okay, so now let's preview again and see this text composable that is going to be created. Okay, so you can see here is our output, but this is not taking up the whole width. So we are going to fix this. Another case here, you can see everything is aligned at the center. So I want to make this through the parent composable to make everything centered, so that whenever we create here other items, they are going to be added. So for this case, inside here our column composable, I'm going to add one parameter here, which is just the horizontal padding, horizontal alignment. And by default here, I can give this alignment dot center horizontally. So this one is going to center everything horizontally. But whenever we do this, then our login text is also going to be centered here. So let's look here, which is just going to be different from our design. So our design, our login text is at the left. See, everything is centered. So we want to make this login text to go here. So how can we do this? Basically, let's go inside here. Let's add here another parameter, and this parameter is called align, and we can pass in here alignment to this child decomposable in order to align it different from the rest of other composable. So for this case, I can call here alignment dot start, and this one is going to send it to the start. Okay, and make here our composable take up the whole width. So we can pass in here our modifier and give it fill max width. And this one is going to make the streak. Now let's re-preview again and see. Okay, now our design is starting to take shape here. Okay, one thing inside Android Studio, you can start an interactive mode. So when you hover around here, you can start an interactive mode, and you can see now we are inside an interactive mode. So we are expected inside the text field to be able to touch it or to insert things. So you can see we have a cursor. But right now, I'm typing here inside my keyboard, but nothing is happening. So why this? Because here we have passed in empty parameters. And in Jetpack Compose, everything is stateless. So we have to create a state in order to change this particular composable. Okay, so we have to make a state. And in Jetpack Compose, there are different ways which you can use to declare a state. So I have a dedicated video speaking about states, so you can check inside my Jetpack Compose playlist. Okay, so for this case, we can create here a variable. And I'm going to use this type of state declaration. So for example, here we have a username, and we can specify also the set username. And basically here what we want to do is to use a remember, because when we have recomposition, then this variable is going to be lost if we don't use a remember. So for example, here when we use this remember, it's going to keep this state whenever we recompose, because Jetpack Compose is going to call this function if the state is going to change. So if this variable is directly going to be a variable and not using a remember, then this variable is going to be reinitialized to a default value. That is going to be bad for us. So for this case here, we have to use a mutable. And this one is going to say, hey, this is just going to be a state. And for case, this is just a mutable state of an empty string. Okay, so one thing which also I want to highlight here, we're using a remember, which is going to be remembered during recompositions. Now, what if we have, for example, a orientation change? Basically, this data is going to also be lost, but we can use another remember This one is similar to remember, but it's going to save it during these composition changes. So for example, if we have an orientation change, then we can change it. And now when you hover around, you can see this is just going to be a lambda function that takes up a string and then returns a unit. That's what is going to be take from here. So as you can see inside our login text, we have a onValue change that is just a string returning a unit. So directly here, we can use our username. And let's look at the difference which we are going to have now. So now everything is looking the same, but visually, so you can start an interactive mode because we did not end it. So for this case, let's just click here and you can see now we have the cursor. But now when I type, everything is appearing, and this is because we have a state. What we want to add also here is the spacer between these two composable here. And that is really easy. We can use a spacer composable that is going to render empty space. And because we're using a column here, we can pass in a modifier.height and give it a certain height. So we can use here item spacing in order to keep this spacing here. The next case is to create also this password, which is just a similar. So what I can do here is press Ctrl D in order to duplicate this. And you can see we have the same. Okay, so similarly here, I can just press Ctrl D to duplicate this to have another state. So instead here of username, we can have our password. And here we can call this set password. Okay, so inside here, let's change this state and to be password, and also here to use set password. Okay, so on this here, we are going to use a lock. As you can see here, we are using an icon that is a lock and give it the same. Another case which I want to change here is the keyboard type. So for a case, we can use keyboard type.password. And also we can change our visual transformation. So here basically we can call password visual transformation. So this visual transformation is just an object and you can easily create your own. So we have this one with a composable that is actually going to mask this particular text and have an effect like this one here. So let's preview and see the changes we have made. Now let's try to click here. And because we are inside a interactive mode, you can see now we have the effect as inside our design. Okay, so let's continue to add other things. So another thing you can see here, we have this remember me, and these are aligned inside a horizontal sequence format. So for this case, we can use a row composable to handle this. So for this case, let's create here a row composable. And for this case, we have to use a checkbox. Because here we have a checkbox. And we can create also its state because we have here the checked that is going to be false. And also we have the unchecked change, which also is going to be a lambda function. So as you have seen here, inside Jetpack Compose, we're using a lot of lambda functions. So also let's duplicate this. Let's Ctrl D. Here we can just change our state, this to be checked. And here we can just call this unchecked. Unchecked change, or we can just call it set checked. Everything is going to work. But the different part here is the mutable state. Instead of a string, now we want this to be a boolean. And by default, we know that whenever user is going to start here, it's going to be not checked. So we are going to pass in here false. So inside here, our checked, instead of passing directly false here, so we can just pass in here this state. So we can observe it. And whenever we change here, we can just call here our unchecked change. So we have our checkbox, the first case. Then the next case here is we have this text here. Okay, now let's create here our text. This is just going to be a normal text. And here we can just call remember me. Okay, so you can see here we have our checkbox and also we have our text. But you can see also here we have our password. So we can add here another one by adding a spacer, or we can use something that is going to be really easy. And let's just press Ctrl X. We cut these two texts and add another row composable inside here. And this row composable is going to give us this. Okay. So we have two rows. So this one is going to hold up between these two texts here. So this checkbox and also this remember text. And the last case here is we have this here, forgot password, and we can use here this by using a text button. That is going to be really easy, and add here the on click, which we can pass in here an empty lambda parameter. Okay, now let's pass in here the text, and this text is going to be forgot password. And give it a question mark or not. So we have here these two. Okay, so now let's preview here and see the changes. Our text are just scrambled. So in order to make this fit perfectly here, we can pass in here parameters inside our row composable. So you can see inside this row, which we have inside here a checkbox and our text, because this is happening because they are not aligned perfectly. So for this case, we have to pass in here the horizontal alignment, and this is going to help us to arrange them to the center. So we can just call here our arrangement, and also we can pass in here our vertical alignment and give it center vertically. So this one is going to help us to align them perfectly. Another case, when you observe here, you can see these are not touching here to the end, and we can use this by using a modifier and also the horizontal arrangement functionality here. So inside here, the parent composable that holds between these two child, the text button and also the row composable here, we can easily fix this by passing in here the modifier and give it fill max width. And the next case here, we can pass in here the horizontal arrangement, and we want to space them between so that they can touch both ends. So we can call here space between, and this one is going to do us a trick. Okay, now let's observe here the changes which are going to happen. So now you can see here they are aligned perfectly. We have made a bit of progress, so we have created this part. So the next part is to add this button here. Okay, so for this case, we can just go below here and go below our row. And below the row here, I want to copy this. Let's press Ctrl C and copy the spacing and paste it here. Okay, so let's create a button and give it the on click, and give it a text here and call this login. Okay, so now we have our button, but this button is taking up the whole width. So we can pass in here a modifier and call .fill max width. And this one is going to do us a trick. Okay, now let's re-preview again. Okay, so we have here our button and everything is looking as inside our design. Create this composable here. And you can see this composable is actually aligned to the bottom here. So we're going to see a trick that we can easily accommodate this. So for this case, I'm going to create a separate composable and create a new composable. And let's call this, which are going to be the options that we're going to have. Okay, so the first case which I want to do is to make these three buttons here are going to be clickable. So for this case, I'm going to add the on icon click, which is going to help us whenever this icon is going to be clicked, so we can show a message. And this is just going to be of type int, and this one is going to be unit. Another case here, we have a button that is called sign up. So we can just call this on sign up. And this actually is going to return a unit, not taking any parameter. And the last case is to pass in here a default modifier. So these are the parameters which I'm going to require. So the next case is I want to get these three icons here because they are inside our drawable. So when you go to a resource, if you have the package from a repository, then you are going to get these icons here. So these are icon resource. So I can just call this icon list and use here a list. And inside here now I can access all the drawables. Let's import our class, and I want to select the icon GitHub. So let's start with Instagram. Then let's duplicate this 3 times. So I can create here a column composable. Okay, so the first case is to give the modifier. And I want this to take up the whole width. So we have to use our modifier because this is the parent composable. Okay, so for this case, I want to give it fill max width. Another case, I want to align everything center. So for this case, I can just call vertical alignment and call this arrangement.center. Another case is for horizontal alignment, and I want to align it to the center also. So I have to call alignment.center horizontally to make everything centered. Okay, so we have here the text. So we can just call here our text, and this text here is going to read. Okay, so I have the icon list. So I can call here our icon list and use for each index. So the great things about Jetpack Compose, you can use Kotlin functions here. So we have the index, and here I'm just going to call this icon res ID and use the icon composable. And for now, we are going to pass in a painter resource because these are just inside our project. So we can pass in here a painter resource and pass in here the icon res ID in order to get the resource. So if we had the image vector, then we can use the image vector modifier, so for a case. And for content description here, for example, we can just call this alternative. So this is just for accessibility purposes, and it's going to help people who cannot see well. Okay, for this case, we can pass in here the modifier. Okay, so I want to size this. I give it a size, and the size is going to be 32 dp. So this one is going to shrink it. Take this. Another case is I want to make everything clickable. And inside here, now I can call on icon click. And whenever I click the icon, I want to pass the index of that particular selected icon. And also you can just call here .clip. Now another case, I want to give it a little bit of a spacer and give a modifier .height. I think here we have to call these alternative options inside here. Okay, now we have here our on click. Let's now handle this by passing an empty lambda. Let's pass in here a modifier because we have a default modifier. Let's leave it as it is for now, and on sign up click. Okay, so everything is going to look perfectly. Let's preview and see the changes we have made. Text is rendered here, and as you can see, these are rendered vertically and not horizontally. So we can easily fix this. Let's just go inside here, and instead of these icons here, we can just press Ctrl X to cut this. And now one thing, we can add here a row composable. And inside here, let's give it a horizontal arrangement. And we want to space everything evenly. So we can pass in here the arrangement. And we can press Ctrl V to paste back this. Now let's re-preview again and see the changes. Now we have everything looking perfectly. But one thing which we want to do is to move this text, to move from here and go down below here. And right now here we have to use the same technique which we used to align this. And it's going to be somehow different but similar. So for this case, I'm going to pass in here a modifier. And what we want to do is to use fill max size. So it's going to take up the whole size, but there is one composable that is called wrap content size, which is going to wrap it to the content size which it has. And for this case, we can pass in here the alignment. That is going to give us the freedom to align it whenever we want. So for a case, we are just going to give it alignment.bottom center. This one is going to take it to the bottom to align it. So now let's re-preview again and see the changes. Okay, now you can see here our text are aligned below and everything is looking perfectly. Okay, so the only thing which you can see here, we don't have a spacing between these items. And I have observed that we kept this outside this for each index. So for this case, we can press Ctrl X, and inside here, this for each index, actually we have here, and we kept this but with a height. And instead, this is just inside a row. So we have to use a width instead of height. So we can call here width. Now let's re-preview again. Okay, so now you can see there is a space added between these two items here, and it's looking perfectly. Now everything is looking perfectly. So one thing which I want to do is whenever we click something like this to show a toast message, because when we have this inside the real world, we are going to perform a network request in order to log in a user. And basically we have used this on click here and passed in the index. so we can identify which one we have clicked. So let's just go inside here, our alternative. And when you look here, you can see we have an integer that is going to be passed here. We can rename this to index. That is going to be the index that is going to be passed. So for this case here, we can use a when statement and use the index. Actually, whenever this is going to be clicked, then we have the index. So if the index is going to be 0, then we know this is the user clicked the Instagram logo. And call .current in order to obtain the current context, and call here our toast message, and actually pass in here the context. And here it's going to be, for example, let's press Ctrl C to copy this. And here it's going to be GitHub. And lastly, here is going to be Google. So we're going to see this. Okay, so when we preview this inside here, this is not going to show us a toast message. So we can easily go. So if you have a preview function, and you can see we have this icon here. So this one is going to let you run this through an emulator or an Android phone if you have a physical phone. So I have connected here a physical phone. So I'm going to click this and run it. Our preview is actually running, and you can see we have installed it successfully. So in order to view it with Android Studio Headhome, you can easily just click here, running device. Let's go to our device manager, sorry. So when you go here through the device manager, you can see here the devices which you have. So I have connected this one. So you can see we have this start mirroring, and this one is going to mirror the device directly here. So this is just my phone actually, and you can see I'm not typing anything, but I'm just touching through my phone here, and you can see it's launching. So this one is just a great feature in order to visualize yourself. So for this case, you can see here we are typing, and also here, and everything is working perfectly. So what we wanted to test is this one here. So you can see now Instagram login click, and here GitHub, and also Google login. So everything is working perfectly, but only the theme here is not working accordingly because we have not changed our color here. So for this case, if you go directly to our main activity, let's go to our main activity and test this. So inside here, we had the greeting. So you can see this surface here is going to change up the color, and we are using here a background color scheme. So for this case, we can just remove this and call here our login screen directly. Okay, so when you want to run this, now you can see inside here we have our preview login screen. So you can just change this to the configuration that which we want. We can see we have all configurations, and here we have app. So you have to select this app in order to run this configuration. So for this case, I can just click here, run now, and everything is going to run. Otherwise, it's going to run that preview, which we had inside here, our login screen. So you can see we had this preview. We can see our device is actually running through our phone, and you can see everything now is looking perfectly according to our design, and everything is okay. Okay, so I think our login screen is almost complete. So the next case here is to create the second screen, and that is just going to be the sign up page. So let's create here a new quoting class of file, and actually select a file and call this sign up page. Let's create a new composable, and we can just call this sign up. So here is our sign up page, and as you can see, it's looking like this. So we can just follow along. So let's create here a column, and this is just going to be similar to what we had inside our login screen. So basically, I can just go inside here our login screen. Let's go to top and copy this. So the next case here is to create this text here, and you can see this is just similar to login screen. So what I'm going to do is go to login screen and press Ctrl C, press Ctrl E, and we can press enter to return back to where we were. And here we can just press in here our header text, and this is going to be auto imported. So instead here we can just call sign up. and the layout is similar to what we had inside our login screen. Okay, so the next case here, we have a bunch of text fields, and this is just also similar to what we had. So we can press Ctrl E and go to our login screen. Let's just copy this, press Ctrl C, press Ctrl E again, and go back to our sign up page and paste it here. The only difference here, we are going to change this because here we have our first name, and also we have to create our state. So we can easily just go above here and create our state. So for example, here we have our username. Sorry, this is not username. It is first name. And we can use remember savable. And we want to use a mutable. This is just going to be a mutable state of a string. And here now we can just change to our first name. And here we can just call on first name change. And this one is going to work perfectly. So I'm going to do the similar process to other items here. Okay, so we are going to do the similar process for all other this. So I'm going just to add this state here. So as you can see, we have the last name, email, password, confirm password, and also agree, which is just going to be this checkbox here. And basically below here, we can add other text fields. Okay, so I'm just going to paste this because I already added here. Okay, so what I have added is just this first name. Then we have here a spacer, and basically I can just import this and it's going to be imported. So we have added a spacer with default padding. So we have added for last name, email, password, and the confirm password. And basically here you can add visual transformation, but because this user want to confirm their password, so you can just leave as it is, or you can just transform it. So for example, here on the password, we can change the keyboard type and give it keyboard type password. So let's press Ctrl C, and actually we can duplicate it here also and press Ctrl V. Now let's create a preview function and see. Let's create here a new composable. And here basically we have to add that preview composable and show system UI, make it to be true. So here is our preview, and I think everything is looking according to our design, but only one thing is just this first name here. We have to change. As you can see, we have this icon here. So inside our first name, when you click here, actually it's going to navigate you to this place here. So what I want to do is to remove this icon here. So I can just press Ctrl X, and basically that is going to remove that icon here. So everything is going to remain similar. So the next case is to create this one here. So I'm going to show you a different way, because inside the login screen, we actually created similar screen. So when you go here below, we created this by using a row composable. And this actually is a valid way, but also we have another way, which is by using spans. So let me show you these two ways, which you can pick yourself the favorite which you want. And here basically, let's create a row. And this row is going to create us this checkbox and also this text. So for this case, let's create here our checkbox. And for our checked, here we can pass in agree and the on agree change. Okay, so the next case here is to create this text. We can create a row and use a text button, which is just going to be a valid way, or we can use a single text that is called an annotated text. And this one is also a good one. So for example, here we can create our text. So we have our privacy text. So let's call this privacy text. And instead of privacy here, we can just call our policy. So the next case here is to build annotated text. So let's create here a little room and create annotated text. And we can use build annotated string. Okay, so here we are going to use annotated string, and for this case we can use with a style. So with this style here, we're going to pass in the style which we want. So for example, here we can pass in the span style, and basically we can change different things. So for our case, we're just going to change here the color. And this color, we are going to use material theme dot color scheme and use on background. So with this, we are going to use here a clickable text in order to make that clickability available. So if not, then this text here, if we don't change using this on background, then you can see we have here a dark background and this text here is going to be rendered black. So for this case, we have also to change this span here by using this on background, because this is just automatically figuring out if it's on a dark background, then it's going to show something that is going to be visible. Otherwise, it's just going to render a black text. So for this case, we have to change this also. Now what we can do, we can call here append. And for example, here I call I agree. Okay, so we append this first text. Then we can append here the spaces which we have. So by rendering a space, we can just append an empty string by inserting here a space. Okay, so the next case here is, let's just copy this, press Ctrl C and paste it here. Now we want to pass in here the privacy. So let's just remove this first. And instead here of color scheme on background, we want to use the primary color, because here we are using this privacy. So we can just use here primary color to change this. And for this case, we want to push this string so that it's going to be clickable when we want to observe it. So for this case, we can pass in here a tag and the annotation string. So the tag here, which is just going to be the privacy text. And also the text which we want to push actually is just the privacy text. So just bear with me, this is just going to be really easy. And what we want to do is to append. So this one is going to create a tag, and here we are going to append the actual text. So for this case, we can just call here our privacy text. And this one is going to work as expected. So the next case, let's just copy this and append it here. Now we can just add a little bit of space between. So we have here space and here space, and added here an end. Now we have our policy. So we can easily now change, instead of privacy text, now we can just call here our policy text, and also here our policy text. Now let's append also our policy text. So this one is going to render the text here. Now here we have our annotated string. So previously we used, when we want to render a text, we used a text composable and actually pass it there. So this one is also applicable, but we can use directly here a clickable text. So for our case, then we can pass in here the annotated text. So let's pass in here annotated string and pass in here the clickable, the on click. Or we can directly, because this is just the last parameter, we can just open up here. So you can see here we have the offset, which is just each particular index of that item. So let's just call this offset. So inside here, our offset, now we can just call our annotated string. And what we want to do is to get the string annotations. And here we have to pass in from where to start and where to end. So for a case, we can just pass in here offset and offset in order to get it. So this is just a list. As you can see, it's returning a list of annotated string. So we can use here a for each index. So let's use for each index. So we can just use here a for each, no need for the index. Okay, so we have here the annotated string. So we can check here which particular tag is going to be clicked. So we can use here a when statement and call it .tag. Now we can change here our privacy text. If our privacy text then is going to be clicked. So for this case, we can show a toast message. So let's write here a toast. Okay, so we are required to pass in here the context. So let's just go above here and create a context. And also here we can check our policy text. Let's show a toast message. And instead now of privacy, so here we can say policy. which can be used to navigate from this one screen to another screen. So you can see here we have pushed the tag here inside our annotated string. When we use this push string annotation, we added a tag, which is the tag here that is the privacy text, and also here the policy text. So we are going to use that tag by using this annotation here, string.tag, and also check if this is going to be clicked. Then we show a toast message, and also here show a toast message accordingly. You can see here we have our text and it's actually available here. But one thing you can see, they are not aligned perfectly, so we can use here our alignment functionality in order to align them to the center. So we can just go here because we have a row. So we can pass in here the horizontal arrangement, and we want to arrange them to the center, so we can call arrangement. And also the vertical alignment, we can pass vertical alignment and center it vertically, so everything is going to be centered. Okay, so we have completed this part with the text. So the next part is to deal with this, and here we have our sign up page and also our account here. So that is really easy, so we can just go below here. Let's just collapse everything here, so we have our row and the row is collapsed. Okay, so now here we can add a little bit of a space between these two items. So let's just press Ctrl C and paste it here, and you can see this space is a little bit bigger between these items and here. So we have our default padding, so basically here we can just use and add other padding, so we can call here dp, because this is just the variable, and we can import the extension function here. Now we have our spacing that is a little bit bigger. Now similarly, we can just call here our button, pass in here the on click. The next case here also is to give it a modifier. And now we have our button. So lastly, we can just create here. Let's press Ctrl C and add a little bit of a spacer here. So we can use here a row to do the similar process, or we can use the spannable text. So also I'm going to use a spannable text. So for this case, I'm just going to call this sign in text and basically call this sign in. Now let's create here our sign in annotation and call here our build annotation. And basically now we can just build this. So we can create here with this style and pass in here our spanner style and change the color. So use here our material theme and use the on background for now. So you can change different things here on this spannable text. So for a case we have here, let's add here an appended text and call here already have an account. Then we can append another text, which is just the space which we have. So basically you can see here we have two spacing. So we can just add another space. Now let's call with this style again and pass in here the spannable style. And for color now we can use our material theme.color. Now we can use our primary color. Okay, so inside here we can call push string annotation, and for the tag part we are going to pass in here the signing text and also signing text to be rendered. Okay, and here we can append now. So this one is going to push and not render it. So to render this we can just call signing text. And similarly here let's create a clickable text. So let's just call here clickable text. And here we can just pass in the sign in annotation. Okay, so for this case, let's just go outside here. So we have here our sign in annotation. So we can just call here sign in annotation. And the last part here is we have our offset. Similarly, we can use here a sign in annotation and call get annotations. And we can pass in here offset, comma offset. Now here we have to check if it.tag, because we have only a single tag, so we can just check here our sign in text. Then we can show just a toast message here. So let's create here a toast message. And here we can pass in the context. Okay, so we have done similar process as we have in the previous section. Okay, now let's preview and see the changes we have made. Okay, now here actually our data is rendered, and you can see we have here our text and everything is looking perfectly. So now let's try to click here. You can see sign in text clicked, policy text clicked, and here sign in text clicked. And we can try to run this through our application directly. So we have to go to our main activity. And since here we are just rendering a single screen, we don't have navigation yet. So we're going to see how we can insert a navigation. So for this case, let's just call here our sign up page in order to view it actually. So we can call here our sign up screen. And before we run it, because we are just going to run our preview, so we have to select app, then rerun it. Okay, now this is just relearned, and you can see everything is looking according to our design. So we have here everything. Let's try to type here, for example, everything is actually working. Okay, so I have just typed a bunch of items here. Now you can see our data is actually out of the scope, and we cannot even scroll here. So I don't have the button. So we have to add the scrollability. So you can use a lazy column to fix this issue, but because we don't have the advantages of lazy column, so we can use a state in order to add scrollability on this particular page. And this just makes sense. And then I'm going to show you how you can add the scrollability to this page. So let's navigate back to our sign up page and see. So in order to add that scrollability, so we can just come inside here our modifier and basically add a vertical scroll. And here we have to pass in a state, and we have a remember scroll state, which is just sufficient to make this scrollable. And you have to use this if you have only small screens that are rendered and don't affect performance. But if you have a large list, then you can use a lazy column. But for a case, we are just using this vertical scroll because we don't have many items to render, and they are actually rendered on one time or on one go. Okay, now let's try to rerun again. Okay, so it's launched. Now we can just go inside here, and you can see now it's actually running here. Let's try just to rotate our device, because this one is going to make our screen smaller. Now let's try. You can see we can easily scroll to the bottom and also scroll to the top. So now we can just return back to our normal state. And even if here we type a bunch of characters, okay, so we have made our text field really big. And you can see now we can easily scroll back to the bottom. So we have all of our screens, but now we don't have the navigation mechanism that we can use to navigate. And also I want to add other 3 screens that are going to help us to learn what is navigation in Jetpack Compose and how we can handle the navigation properly. So inside here, our sign up page, I can create the privacy screen and also the policy screen. So let's create here a new coding class of file. And also let's create another class here. And let's call this, okay, so let's create here a new composable. And here we can just call this privacy screen. Okay, so here I'm going to use a box composable. This one is going to help us, so we can pass in here a modifier, and we want to fill the max size. Another case here is to provide the content alignment, so we can just align it to the center. Okay, so a box is just a similar, and then we are going to have this text here. So one thing which I have is just the text that shows us the privacy screen, and also the button, which is just going to be finished. So we have to pass in here the callback on button click, and this is going to return as a unit, and this is basically for navigation purposes. So we have this our privacy screen, so we can just press Ctrl+C and go to our policy screen and paste it here. So instead of privacy, so we can just call here our policy screen. and here is just going to be our policy screen. So here we want to demonstrate how we can use navigation to navigate between a login flow and different things that is going to simulate in a real world application. Okay, so the last screen which I want to add is the home page. So when we finish up everything, I can add here inside our UI, let's create a new coding class of file. Let's call this home screen. Okay, so instead of privacy, I'm just going to call this home screen. And we don't want any callback here because we're going to be navigated directly to the home screen. So let's change this. And basically we don't require this column now because we have only a single composable here. Okay, so we have here our home screen. Now we can deal with the navigation part. So for this case, let's just go outside here and create a new coding class of file. Let's call this navigation. Okay, so we can create here a new composable and let's call this my navigation. And one parameter which we are required to do here is to create the navigation host. So the navigation host is a composable that is going to help us to decide what screen to show at that particular destination. So we should have a state that is going to help us to observe between these different screens. And that in Jetpack Compose is called the navigation route. So for this case, we can just call here our nav host controller. This one is going to help us to control the navigation between different parts of our composables. So for this case, we can create our navigation host, which is just the navigation composable that is going to host the graph. So we should create a graph, and this requires two parameters. So the navigation controller and also the start destination. So these are the two parameters which are required, and the third parameter is the navigation graph. So basically the list of composables which we want to navigate from one screen to another screens, which we are going to see. So these basically are the required parameters. So the nav host controller we already have, so we can just pass in here directly the nav host controller, and the start destination which we have to define here. And in order to define this destination, they can be a string. And in order to manage them, you can create a way which you can remember them by creating constants. So there are different ways in Kotlin to create constants, but a cleaner way is by using a sealed class. So for example, here we can create a sealed class and call this route. Okay, so here we can define the data classes which we have. So for example, here we have our login screen to be our first route. And here now you can pass in parameters. So this is just a simple navigation without passing parameters. So if you want to learn more about navigation, I have a complete navigation tutorial inside my playlist. So this one we're just going to call it login screen, and this is going to inherit from the route. Okay, so I'm going to duplicate this and create other screens. So we have here our login screen. The next class, we have the signup screen. Okay, so these are our routes and we can use them as our start destination. So for example, here inside the start destination, so we can use here our navigation, our route, and call our login screen .name. So basically here we are getting the name directly here to be our start destination. Now we have to define the composables or the graph in order to map between these routes and the particular composable screen. And that is by calling here a composable. And this takes in two parameters, that is the route and also the particular composable. So here for our route, we can just call this route. And basically now we have our login screen, for example. So we can call here our route as our composables. So if you have, for example, arguments, they can be passed here in a separate parameters. So for a case, we are not going to deal with that. Okay, now we can press Ctrl C and paste this several times because we have 6 screens here. Okay, so instead of login screen here, we can just go to our sign up page. And directly here, we can just add a lambda, which is just the on button click. And here basically we have our home screen, and basically we can just call here our home screen. Okay, so we have all of our screen defined inside here our navigation host. So this is just our navigation graph now. So whenever we tell our navigation controller that, hey, we want to go to our signup screen, then it can use this route to map together with this screen and display this particular composable. But right now here, when we run our application, so let's just go directly to our main activity. And instead we are calling here our signup screen directly. But first we have to get the navigation route. So we have to call our navigation nav controller. Remember nav controller. So we have our nav controller as a state. Now we can call here my navigation. And basically we have to pass in here the nav controller. And we are hoisting the state because we can use this nav controller beside here to control navigation differently rather than keeping it inside my navigation. So this is just a concept in Jetpack Compose to hoist a state up to the composable caller. Okay, so we are inside here now my navigation. So when we try to run our application, basically we are going just to have only our login screen because we don't have any mechanism to navigate from one screen to another screen. So in order to do this, we have to hook up inside our login screen, for example here. As you can see, we had this clickability, but we didn't have anything that is going to be invoked here. So we can just pass in the event back to the composable caller in order to manage this. So you should not pass here, for example, you could pass here the nav controller. And then use this nav controller to navigate, but this is not advised. So we have to pass in here the events, which are going to be called inside my navigation in order to navigate from one screen to another screen. Okay, so for example, inside here, our login screen, we can have, for example, the on login click, which is going to return us with the unit, and also on sign up click, which we can use. So if the user clicks the button, then we can log in. So let's just go below here. So here we have our login. So we can just call here our on login click and pass the event back to be handled there. Now here, if you had for navigation to different places, then you could pass in here, for example, on icon click and handle it inside your my navigation. So for a case, we are not going to be navigating to these screens here, because it's just a demonstration purposes. Now we have here the on sign up, which we want to navigate to the on sign up page. So for this case, we can just call on sign up click and pass in the reference directly. So here now our login screen is going to have this, and we're going to get some errors because we have here our preview. So we can pass in here empty lambda composables because this is just for preview purposes. Then we are going to handle this later. So now if we go back to our navigation, so let's go to our navigation, you can see our login screen is getting some error. So here we can pass in the on login click and handle here our login, and on sign up click and handle the sign up. So for example here, inside our on login, we can use our navigation host controller and call .navigate in order to navigate to a specific destination. Now here we can just call our route .homescreen .name. So this one is going to navigate us there because we are already clicking here. So you could have here, for example, to perform validation request and send this data to the server. So basically, before you navigate here, you could call a view model, for example, that communicates to the backend. So for a case, we don't have the backend, so we are just going to call this navigation to navigate to our home screen. And inside here, the on sign up click, now we want to navigate to the sign up page. So what we can do, let's just copy this, press Ctrl C and paste it here. So instead of home screen here, now we can just call our sign up screen. So when we call this navigate here is going to link to this particular route name, and then it's going to render this particular screen. So that's how Jetpack Composable navigation works. And we are going to see here there are some problems which are going to arise, and we are going to fix them. So for now, let's go to our sign up page. So inside our sign up page here, we can add several parameters that we are going to require. So the first case is on sign up click. So this is when we want to sign up and navigate back to. And also another case here is the on login click. So here is we want to navigate back. Hey, I have already an account, so navigate me back to the login screen. Basically, we can navigate there. Or for example, a user wants to go to the policy, so we can create here a policy. And lastly here is the on privacy click, or if they want to go to the privacy screen. So here you could open, for example, a website, or if you are rendering it inside your app, then you can just still use this similar architecture which we are using here. Okay, so now we can just go back here. Okay, so you can see inside here our clickable text modifier. We have here our clickability, which we used here inside the on click. So we want, besides showing just a toast, we can call here now our privacy. So for example, here on privacy click, and basically now we have to invoke it because we are not passing the reference. So you have to invoke it here. Let's, okay, come here also, instead of just calling on policy. The next case is whenever we click this on sign up button, and basically here we can just call on sign up. So here we are passing the reference. We don't require to invoke it here because this is going to be invoked outside of here. Okay, so the next case here is the clickability which we had inside our sign in. So here we show the toast only signing in to go. So for this case, we want to navigate back to our login screen. So basically here we can just call here sign in. We can call this on login click, which is going to send us back to our login screen. Okay, now we are having here error. So we can just add here empty lambda parameters because all of these are just lambdas. And everything is going to work as before. Now let's just go back to our login screen. Sorry, we go to our navigation screen. And here inside our sign up, we have some errors. Okay, so we can use these clickables in order to navigate from one screen to another screen. So similarly here, we can just press Ctrl C and copy this and paste it here. Now we have our navigation controller. So we want to navigate now because the user is already signed up. So we want to navigate them back, for example, to our home screen. So for this case, we can directly go to the home screen whenever we click this button. And when we click on login, so we can just go to our login screen. So instead here, we can just go to login screen. And this one is going to send us there. Another case here is when we click on privacy. So we can just go to the privacy screen. And whenever we click policy, we can just navigate to the policy screen. And now we have it. So inside our policy screen here, when we click finish, we want to do one thing, that is to navigate back. And instead of navigating using the route, we can just call .navigate up, which is going to send up back to the composables that is back in the navigation stack. So if this is going to be the sign up screen, then we go there. And this is just a simple, so we can just press Ctrl C. And also inside the privacy screen, we can do that also. Now I think everything is looking perfectly. Let's try to run here and see there are some issues which are going to arise and we're going to fix them. So let's run it here. Okay, so now our app is launched, as you can see here, because we set here our start destination to be the login screen. Directly here, the navigation has set us here. Okay, now let's try to write here, for example, hood, and pass in here the password. Everything is working fine. Now we can do one thing is click here, for example, go to sign up page. And when we click this sign up page here, we are navigating here. And as you can see right now, let's click here privacy. We are going to privacy screen. When we click this back, we are navigating back and everything is looking perfectly. Okay, so we are navigating to our home screen. So one thing which I want to do is whenever we reach here the home screen, we cannot send the user back to the navigation flow because this is going to be out of sync. So now you can see we are going back to the sign up page. So this is not ideal. And here the sign up page, when we click this, we are going back to our login screen. Now let's click here inside our login screen and click login. We are going to the home screen. Now when we click here back button, you can see we are navigating back to the login screen. So this is not ideal in a real world application. So you have to manage this, and we are going to manage this in a simple and cleaner way. Okay, so before we manage these login and logging issues, you can see here I want, when these text fields are going to be empty, I want also this sign up page here or button to be disabled until we fill out all of this, because right now you can see there is nothing that is selected. And basically we don't have control over anything. So we are going to send weird things to our server if we do actually like this. So we have to fix this first. So we can just go, for example, inside our login screen. So let's do first inside our login screen and fix this. So if these are not going to be empty, then we can allow the user to send it. So this one to be checked is not necessary because the user is not required to set this. So for that case, we have to go back to the button here. So inside the button, you have to pass in here, for example, enabled. So this is just a Boolean variable, and we can check here is fields empty, and if this is going to be true, then this one is going to be disabled, and if this is going to be false, basically it's going to be not disabled. So for that case, we check here if our field is going to be empty. Another case, inside here our sign up page, what I want to do is compare between these two passwords here. Let me show you, because here we have the password and also the confirm password. So this is just going to be a simple way to show that between these two passwords if they are actually together. So for this case, we can check here val. And as you can see, I'm not using remember state because these variables actually depend on a state. So they are going to change according to the state that is available. That's why I'm not using remember and mutable state for these variables. Okay, now we want to compare between the passwords. So in order to compare this, we can check is password same. And this by default, we can use here a by delegate method and call this remember. And by default here, we have to use a mutable state of false. Okay, so I want to use this var. So I'm going to use a different way of declaring a state. So this one is going to give us the availability on how we can change it. So I'm using here a by delegate method in order to use this as the variable. So you can see when you press Ctrl Q, this is just a Boolean and not directly a mutable state. So if you use here an equal sign, you have to use is password.value. So inside here our button, whenever we click this, so let's just press Ctrl X. Let's invoke it here. Okay, so before we can compare here, we can compare here is password same, and what we can do is use our password. Now we can use here an if statement. So if not is the password the same, then we want to sign up actually. So right now we have to invoke this. Here we are supposed to use confirm password and not password and password. Okay, so these errors are going to go away. So as you can see here, now we are comparing between this. So if this is not going to be the same, then we don't want to log in here. And what actually we want to do is to show an error. So we can just go above here. So above our column, and for example, above our text field here, sign up, we can create an if. And for example, you can use an if statement, or you can use this composable that is called animated visibility. So here basically we can pass in a Boolean function. So we can check here is password the same. So if the password are not the same, then it's going to show up this text. Okay, so the last thing which we can use to manage here is the fields. So this one is going to look if is fields. And basically here we can use similarly as how we did. So for example, we can use here our first name. Okay, so these are just our fields. So you can see we're checking this. If this is going to be empty, then it's going to return us with a Boolean value. So what we can do is directly go to, and also here beside adding this modifier here, we can just add enabled. And right now here, let's try to rerun again and see the difference which we have made. So you can see now our button is actually grayed out. This means we cannot click it. And this is the grid part. You have to make first validation from the client side. And basically when you have, for example, a server, then you have to do this on the server side also to validate the data which is sent from the client. So for example, here I'm typing, but the button is still not yet turning. Now let me type here. You can see everything now is looking perfectly. Now we can click just login. And this one is going to take us to the login screen. Let's go to our sign up page. Let's click agree. You can see sign up page here. Now when I click sign up here, it's not going to navigate us and show us an error here. So you can see password is not matching. So if we have to make it matching, so we have to change this password here. Now you'll see the error is going to go away and we are navigating back to our home screen. Okay, now let's fix the problem with navigations. Okay, so one thing here, I want to create a simple function, extension function. So let's create this. And basically here, I want to receive a route. That is going to be of type of string. Okay, so inside here, I'm going to use the navigate in order to navigate to this particular route, which we have. But here I'm going to open up the navigation option builder. So inside here, I can pop up too. So this method here is going to help me to pop up. So currently, when you see here, let's navigate here. We are navigating back here. So let me click here and click here again to sign up page. So I'm navigating multiple times from these different screens, and you'll see one problem which is arising here. Let's click back. We are navigating back to login screen. Again, when we click back, we are going to sign up page. We are not quitting our application, then going back to login page because there is multiple backstack of this particular screen inside there. So it's going in a sequence order and returning until everything is not inside the backstack, then it can quit the application. So what we are doing here using this pop-up tool, so we want to remove everything inside that particular backstack and remain until that position. So for this case, I'm going to use here a graph. So this graph is going to give me the list, and what I want to do is to find the start destination. So this one is going to give me the start destination and receive the ID. And when I receive the ID, now I can pop up everything and this is going to work smoothly. Now one thing which I want to do here is to save the state and make this to be true if it's going to be available. Then the next case here, I want to call launch Signup. So this one is going to launch only one instance of that particular backstack inside our backstack. So for example, if we have a home screen, then we are going to have only one instance of it inside our backstack. So if there is anything else, then it's going to be removed. So I'm going to make it be true. And because here we have saved the state, I can restore the state here and make it also to be true. Okay, so we have this navigate to Signup, which is going to help us tremendously. So when we want to navigate from one screen to another screen, then we can basically use this navigate to Signup. So for example, when we navigate here inside our own sign up page, okay, so for this case, when we are inside here, there we can just create here navigate to Signup. So I'm not going to use here navigate to Signup, and I'm going to explain why. And inside here, our sign up screen, I'm going to use navigate a single top. So for example, inside here also, I'm going to create navigate to single top. And here basically we can just call navigate to single top. Okay, so I have used these two as the navigate to single top. And also here on sign up, we have used a single top. Then I'm going to rerun again. Now let me click this multiple times here. Okay, now let's click this back. You can see we are here inside the login screen. So last time we navigated back to our sign up page. Now let's click here. You can see we are quitting our application directly. So this is really crucial because now we have fixed one problem. Okay, so another thing here, you can see our composables are still in a messy because here we have different routes. This is just the login screen, for example. And also here we have our home screen. So this navigation here is like I'm creating a new navigation graph and basically differentiating between different types of navigations. So I have this whole contained inside the navigation flow. So this requires us to pass in here the start destination and also the route. So basically here I'm using nested navigation in Jetpack Compose. So the first parameter is the start destination. And here I can pass in the composables. So what we can do is defining here the start destination. And the start destination here is going to be our login screen. So we are going to change this. Now let's press Ctrl X and pass in here our start destination. Now this also can contain its route. So these are going to be the two composables inside here, our navigation host. So now I can reference these composables from here. So I don't want to reference, for example, here directly going to this composable. So we can define this by calling it, for example, login flow. So if we had also other multiple composables that are related to home feature, then I can create a navigation that is directly related there. So now you can see I have full composables that are related to our login feature. So I have all the screens and now I can just use this as our navigation graph for our login screen. Now to start our start destination, because now our composables is inside this navigation, instead of calling the login as our start destination from our navigation host, I can just call this login flow here. So I have a complete video that goes in depth about nested navigation, so you can check it inside my playlist or inside the card here. So here I'm going to pass in the login flow to be our start destination because we are referencing now here. So when we reach here, this is going to map directly to this its start destination to be this one here. Okay, so basically here I didn't use navigate to single top. What I want to do is when we navigate to our home screen, I want to quit the application entirely. So for this case, I'm going to customize this navigate to home screen directly and remove everything inside our backstack. So when I reach the home screen, then I'll quit the application. So here what I will do is call pop-up2 and pass in the route. So what I want to do is to use this login flow here as the route. So I'll remove everything from the login flow if it's available and basically pop up everything. And this one is going to help me to quit out of our application. And because we are going to quit our application, no need to save the state or restore the state because we are going to recreate our application entirely. So also here inside our privacy, I can just call launch single top and make it to be true. And I can do similarly to our privacy. So let's press Ctrl C. And inside our policy screen, also I want to launch single top. So everything is going to remain the same. Now let's try to run it and see if this is going to help us. Now our app is launched. Let's type here. And also let's type 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's click login. Now we are in the home screen. So we are supposed to, when we click this back button, we quit the application. Let's see if the changes actually helped that. Now we are quitting the application and before we navigated back. So we don't want when the user is in the home screen to be navigated back to the login screen. and otherwise else. Now let's try to our home screen. Okay, now we are inside the home screen. So let's try to click here back. It's actually navigating us to our login screen, which is just the start destination of our application. And when we click here, we are just going to quit our application. So now we are inside here. So I think when we navigate from our sign up page, we should quit entirely. So I know how to fix this, and basically, okay, so we are inside here, the home screen. So when I click here, it's looking for the start destination of this particular login flow. And as you can see here, our start destination of our host is just the login flow. So basically it's popping up everything inside our backstack except this login screen. So that's why when I click here back button, it's taking us to the login screen. So what we can do here, when we are navigating from our on sign up page, so instead of using navigate to single top, we can just call here navigate. Then inside here, we can just pop up everything as how we did until our okay, now let's go to our sign up page. Okay, now let's navigate to our home screen. Now let's try to click here back button. You can see that we are going to quit our application directly here. So this is how you handle your navigation inside Jetpack Compose. It's just really easy. So guys, let's leave it here for this video. So if you find this helpful, please don't forget to provide a like and subscribe for more videos. So bye bye for now. See you in the next video.